Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Now, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that American tariffs on European products have become a reality. According to preliminary estimates, Poland may lose around nearly €2 billion worth, with a risk of losing reaching up to more than $3.5 billion. He also added, however, that a difficult trade agreement is better than a senseless tariff war between allies. Donald Trump's landmark US-EU trade agreement has laid bare deeper tensions in transatlantic relations. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack these geopolitical signals is Michael Bociurkiw, Senior Fellow at the Euro-Asia Center from Atlantic Council, a global affairs analyst just back from Ukraine, whose critical reporting continues to shape international understanding of the war and its broader democratic stakes. Sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
So now, just in the backstage, we were talking about this particular topic, and from my understanding, you have a little bit different opinion when it comes to the Polish Prime Minister's statement. And I'm curious if it has anything to do with statement that a difficult deal is better than a tariff war between allies. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm speaking from the perspective of a Canadian, a very patriotic Canadian who spent a lot of time overseas. And the one thing we found, bearing in mind, is that we're the biggest neighbor, we were the most reliable neighbor, biggest trading partner of the United States, is they've really screwed us over under the Trump administration. And the one thing we found that does work with Donald Trump is toughness. And you have to fight and you have to push, because that's, I think, the only thing he understands. He's very transactional. He only thinks of himself. And I think, in fairness to the diplomats in Brussels and elsewhere, his version of tantrum diplomacy is very confusing, because even I hate to quote the Russians, but they said it the other day, is that Trump blows hot and cold. He can say one thing one day and do something else the other day. So, of course, that creates a problem, too. Very quickly, I do realize that this deal was negotiated by Brussels. I think they caved. They should have stood up.
All right, but a lot of European leaders have also been making the same statement, be it the German Chancellor, be it the French Prime Minister, who says this is a dark day for Europe. However, a lot of them do seem to agree that this is the best deal they can get. Do you think that there's any form of pressure that could have been kind of exerted in order to get a better leverage when it comes to this deal?
Well, I think what they have to keep in mind is the one vulnerability Trump has is that if there is inflation, if prices go up back at home because of tariffs, that's when the rubber will hit the road, as we say. That will cause them political problems. So, unfortunately, with these types of things, you have to take the longer view. You have to hold it out. It's like, look, when the war was starting with Ukraine, we had a panel in London, and we said, people in the United Kingdom have to assume that it's a wartime economy. You're going to have to make sacrifices. Otherwise, it's going to be painful down the road. So I think that's an attitude, too. There is a war, a trade war going on with the United States. The Singaporeans said, actually a few months ago when Trump was doing his tariff blitz, this is a very, very dark day, dark times for the world. And these are types of things that can lead to conflict.
Mm-hmm. And now the European Union says it needs about 5 years to actually build an army that can kind of repel Vladimir Putin. Do you think that it has to do with why the concessions being made on the trade side, that Europe still needs defense coming from the United States and perhaps to kind of at least make up for this gap?
Yeah, well, look, in fairness to the Europeans, I mean, they agreed to a very lopsided energy deal as well. I mean, I think the number is approaching, over time, $1 trillion of purchases from the United States for energy and arms as well. But, the Europeans do have to, of course, build up their armies. But two things here. Number one is, look, the war, as we found in Ukraine, is no longer being fought primarily by tanks, traditional type of hardware. It's more drones and high tech. But secondly, Europe is very, very far behind. And the problem with Europe as well is, they have, a lot of the countries have the same problems we do in Canada, domestic problems, crumbling health systems, immigration, things like that. So politicians are also very constrained in terms of reallocating resources from those types of priorities that the public wants to more defense.
Now, like you mentioned, there's also an energy deal in there. And do you think that there's probably a silver lining where a lot of European countries are still a little bit reliant on Russian energy, and this deal with the United States would give them another provider and perhaps make the exit of using Russian energy a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's really important. And in my world briefing on Substack, I said last night is that I commented on the EU deal with Azerbaijan. It's painful sometimes because you have to close your eyes to human rights abuses on that side, but get their gas and energy. And the other thing I'm hoping my own country, Canada, does is as we lessen our reliance on the United States, we'll, for example, look more to trading energy with Europe. We have a lot of energy, and for example, constructing LNG ports on our eastern coast, closest to Europe, and starting to export there, which will help Europe lessen its reliance on Russia, which will in turn choke the funding to Putin's war machine.
And speaking of Putin's war machine, I know we're jumping topics a little bit, but I really want to pick your brains on this because, well, Trump has recently also announced kind of the shortening of that 50-day deadline. Do you think that this is something substantial? Because, well, Zelensky has been praising that move, but a lot of people are also saying that, well, kind of taking a look at it and being more skeptical about whether or not this kind of secondary sanction would actually be carried out.
Yeah, and just before coming in here, I was reading Putin's pit bull, Medvedev's remarks that, we should go to war with the United States for doing this, for shortening the time. But the big problem here, I think, is that when you start changing the goalpost, you go from 50 days to 2 weeks to 10 days or whatever, it creates gray lines or dotted lines for strongmen, autocrats like Mr. Putin. What you need are solid red lines. So no one really knows whether to take him seriously, whether to take these deals seriously, these deadlines seriously. He does tend to change his mind. And that is also a problem for us in Canada as well, negotiating trade deals because the goalposts keep on moving. But a big fear, of course, in Ukraine is that this was a gift to Putin, this 50-day period, because it allows him to bomb the heck out of Ukraine, as he did last night in Zaporizhia, and continues to do nightly, but also take more territory.
Yeah, now you mentioned stability, and I think that's one thing about the Trump administration that people are really having problem dealing with. And I think one of the statement really highlights that with Ursula von der Leyen saying that, well, at least taking this deal means that there will be stability going forward. Do you agree with that? Even though this might not seem like a favorable deal, at least they'll know where things are going from this point on.
Well, I'm sure the Polish foreign minister, Mr. Sikorski, would agree with me on this, is that you have to stand up to Mr. Putin. You have to be tough if you want stability. And, I think the European leaders have finally got out of their sleepwalking and realized that if Mr. Putin isn't pushed back with all the might Europe can muster, he's going to come further, including here to Poland. The problem, I think, is that the leaders have not made the best efforts they can to convince their public of the threat that Putin poses. One more quick thing. According to the East Europe Foundation, worst case scenario this summer, we have about a month or so left in the summer. If Russia intensifies its summer offensive, the front line could move as much as 60 kilometers. It could displace another 250,000 Ukrainians. And they're not only going to stay in Ukraine when they have to flee, they're going to come here and elsewhere in Europe, and that's going to put added pressure on.
All right. Now, Zelensky has been relatively positive when it comes to Trump's statement in shortening that deadline. Do you think that it's kind of out of necessity, seeing that Zelensky do have to try to cooperate with Trump in any way possible, or do you think that there is a little bit of optimism in there?
Yeah, absolutely. The Ukrainians have learned that not to provoke Mr. Trump. You have two different types of leaders, basically, now in the free world, those who stand up to Trump and those that don't. And I think the Ukrainians have taken the policy decision that they're going to butter him up to the point his cholesterol level is probably going through the roof. But they don't want to rock the boat because they really, really need the continuance of United States military assistance and intelligence to finish the job with Mr. Putin.
Right, and speaking of rocking the boat, also you just came back from Ukraine, and I want to pick your brains on this because there has been quite a big scandal happening within Ukraine right now, especially when it comes to the clipping the wings of a lot of anti-corruption agencies. Of course, Zelensky has then kind of walked it back. What's your analysis on this?
Well, what a boneheaded move on the part of the Zelensky administration. A lot of people say, okay, it wasn't him, it was his chief advisor, chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, who is very, very powerful. But at the end of the day, Mr. Zelensky is a leader, and he has to make the decision. I think he totally misread the mood, the public mood. And also, it took many phone calls from the German chancellor, from EU leaders, to say, if you don't roll back this legislation, you're gonna have to pay for it, and they already have by reduced funding. It really took off the mask of Zelensky, who has been very much lionized by the Western media. But I can share with you a little bit of nuance, because I have been based in Odessa, Ukraine for so long, is that a lot of people are telling me the protest that appeared was not only about this anti-corruption legislation, it was also a lot of frustration with the war going on, with the aggressive tactics of military recruitment, with the way the economy is going. Now, let's be clear, no one is saying let's give up and let Russia win, no way. But there's a lot of frustration after 3+ years of war. And I think Mr. Zelensky should, as I said in the New York Times, look at, for example, Western Ukraine, start looking at lifting martial law a bit, getting tourism business back, opening up some of the airspace, because the Ukrainian economy is really hurting right now.
Right, and I think Zelensky still has a very tough task to juggle between security and also upholding democratic values. And like you mentioned, it's like more than 3 years into the war, and it's really hard to imagine kind of this anti-corruption agencies not becoming perhaps a vulnerability for kind of national unity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And those millions of Ukrainians that have left, gone to places like Canada, I have a lot here, of course, in Poland, tell me, it's going to take two things for us to go back to Ukraine. Number one will be, of course, peace. But the second one is we're not going back to Northern Ukraine, where there's a lot of corruption. And, going back to Zelensky for a minute, I have to say is that, of course, he was the hero at the beginning of the war. Remember, he said, I don't need a one-way ticket out of here. I'm going to stay here. I need weapons. But when the protesters gathered in the thousands about a week ago, right under the presidential administration, a lot of the sign says, come out on the street and talk to us. He did not come out. So I was very surprised with that, because he is, what's the party called? Servant of the people. So come out and talk to your people and calm the nerves. We will see what happens. I don't think we're done with these protests, but they have to put forward a clear signal that it's not going back to the old days.
All right, so we'll have to see how it develops. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.